Okay, I am recording now, so that's great. Okay, I think we're good. Yep, we are recording, so let me go back and pause right here. Does anybody want to say hi with a Q&A, and we'll practice and see if the Q&A is working? I don't see any yet, so let's keep that to the side. Okay, yes, thank you. I'm going to answer. So Stephanie just came in and said, hi, Anne, and I'm going to answer it live. So most of the things that I will answer live as they pop in. So any questions that come in. Hello, Kathy. Yes, perfect. So this is working. I'm grateful that it is. Sometimes this technology is always interesting to learn. I love this Zoom platform. It works out really well for the clients that I work with, and it really works great with this webinar. So thank you both. So I'm just going to say answer live, done. So hey, there you go. All right. It is 7 o'clock. I want to honor your time, so I am going to get started. So thank you again for being here. I greatly appreciate it. And I am talking about PCOS, as you know, this evening. And this webinar, if you've signed up, like I said, you'll get the a copy of the recording, is great for people in your circle. So I went on this morning because if you suffer from PCOS, you know that there's lots of different signs and symptoms, and we're going to talk all about it. And there's reasons for that. There's physiological reasons, but sometimes the people that are in your life don't really understand. So this is a great video to share with them as well. And again, please feel free to answer questions. So I'm just going to go through a couple of different things for you. 1 in 10 women suffer from PCOS. So that's 10%. And I have seen some studies that it is as much as 20% of women suffer from PCOS. And many, many women don't even realize that they're suffering from it. So up to 70% of women that do have PCOS don't even know that they have it. So it's one of those metabolic, it's a metabolic imbalance. And with this, there's signs and symptoms that just seem like PMS or seem like something else. And so it's really important to advocate for yourself if, as we move through this, if you haven't been diagnosed or you know of someone who you think, as we move through this, might have PCOS, you can tell them to go, have their doctors check this out for them. And it takes an average of 4 different doctors to actually come up with an official diagnosis. So the PCOS diagnosis is having, this is a misprint, is having 2 of the following 3 symptoms. High levels of androgens, which is testosterone, male hormone, irregular menstrual cycles, which could be long periods without a menstrual cycle, or heavy, long periods, inconsistent, and then 12 or more ovarian cysts on the ovary. Okay, so those 2 or more. So if you don't have cysts, that's still, if you have irregular menstrual cycles and you have high levels of testosterone, you are classified as having PCOS. Okay, so a little bit about me. This picture, hold on. Can you all hear me? Sorry about that. This is a friend of mine, Karen, and she came to me probably 15 years ago, while I was working as a fitness professional. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on me. Some of you already know a little bit of my background, but I was actually in the fitness industry for many, many years. And that industry I went into really due to my own disorder. So 30 plus years with eating disorder behavior, 2 eating disorders diagnosed, as well as multiple, issues with my body and issues with self-esteem. Karen came into me. She was diagnosed with PCOS as a teenager. She did have a baby in tow, and I didn't know anything about it. And so we worked together for a long time trying to do work, but I didn't really, I wasn't thinking about going and really researching PCOS all that much, because basically it was part of her, I just didn't know anything. I didn't know any better, right? But a little bit after we had been working together for about 3 years, and I realized that nothing seemed to be working that we were doing together, and we went over and over and over, what she was eating and all of her movement and everything that was going on in her life. And that's when I started to kind of research a little bit more about PCOS and what is it. And so as I kind of moved through my own transition, I will say, and realized that I myself didn't want to go through this whole process of dieting, and I wanted to move away from body image issues that I had for myself, excessive exercise and things that were going on in my life. I went on and got some further education. So this is kind of who I am. I'm a certified intuitive eating coach. I have gone on to get my graduate certificate for eating disorders, done a lot of extensive work on body image. I have the exercise background. I've really kind of disconnected exercise from body image or calories or weight, as well as a self-talk trainer and really kind of a lifestyle strategist. So but it was because of this. And then once I was able to kind of have this background, I was able to really help Karen out. But this is why this is passionate for me. Not only do I have clients now that I work with that have PCOS, it was Karen who we developed a great friendship over the years that really started me in this kind of journey with PCOS. So I'm going to get started. All right, so what is PCOS? What I want to share with you a little bit is it is a hormonal imbalance structure, and we have in our brain, our center for hormones is our hypothalamus. Our hypothalamus talks to our pituitary gland. Our pituitary gland talks to our ovaries, our thyroid, and our adrenals. What I like to describe this as is kind of the hypothalamus is like the CEO of a company, right? And it talks to, right, the assistant, financial officer, say, right? So that's the pituitary gland. And then the pituitary gland takes things down to the next, it could be the human resources, and then staffing, and then, external, like marketing, say, right? So there's these 3 other pieces. And this is kind of the connection that happens. The hypothalamus gets direction from the outside, sees what's going on, what's happening, and then the pituitary gland sends signals to the ovaries to do their thing, to the thyroid to do their thing, and to the adrenals to do their thing. Okay, so that's kind of this we want to start with. And with PCOS, what we find is that there's a whole mess of hormones within the ovary system. But if I go back real quick, these ovaries and the thyroid and the adrenals all work together as well. Just like a company would, they have to kind of make sure that they're all on the same page and they know what's going on. So there's a connection between the ovaries, the thyroid, and the adrenals. And as I move forward in this, you're going to see you'll understand a little bit more about this connection and why everything kind of links together. It kind of circles within itself. So the hormones, I'm going to kind of bump what happens with PCOS is there becomes, these are kind of some of the different hormones that are off balance, and then I'll show you why they're off balance. There are higher levels of estrogen, lower levels of progesterone, and increased testosterone. All of these things don't only come from the ovaries, from the pituitary gland and what the ovaries are doing. That's the starting point. But then once the things that happen at the ovaries travel down their system, it also impacts the thyroid gland, and it also impacts the adrenal gland. So let's kind of get into what's going on in your body. Signs and symptoms, you know these, right? Weight gain, especially around the belly. Trouble losing weight. That has to do with the misfiring or the function shifting and the disturbance in the thyroid gland, right? So we already see that the thyroid gland is impacted. Irregular painful periods, like we've talked about. Insomnia, trouble sleeping, that's the adrenals kicking in. Acne, testosterone, high levels of testosterone. Increased hunger and cravings, that comes from an increase in insulin and insulin resistance. So a lot of information, so bear with me. You are prone to increased anxiety and depression, mood shifts, right? Changes in mood, that you understand that's attached to the adrenals. The adrenals and the ovaries. Depression, negative body image, especially in today's society. We'll address that a little bit. Heart disease and diabetes. A lot of these, and these are kind of all coming together. There's a few other things too, like with high testosterone, hair growth, right? Or male pattern baldness. So those are a couple of other things that kick in as well. So the first key that we're going to talk to is lowering stress, and I'll tell you why. So let's kind of move into this a little bit. What happens with stress? With stress, and this kind of comes up, it funnels up and hits. Externally, we have a lot of stress. If you think about your symptoms, so if we go back to the symptoms of weight gain, mood changes, depression, anxiety, right? All of those things are going to impact our own stress levels. When stress is impacted, it is impacted right at the hypothalamus. When it's impacted at the hypothalamus, that means that's what's causing this misfiring from the pituitary. So the hypothalamus, like the CEO of the company, gets confused. It's like he goes out of town and he comes back and he doesn't know what's going on, doesn't know what to send down to pituitary gland to do. Thus, the ovaries, the thyroid, and the adrenals aren't doing their job properly. So it's kind of this little explosion that happens right at the hypothalamus. That's why stress is one of the biggest things to address when it comes to PCOS. So let's talk about it a little bit. I am going to share, this is a great kind of video of what really goes on within the ovary system, and I'm going to kind of share with you how this all comes into play. So what happens at the pituitary gland with the ovaries? When there is a stress impact, right? So there's a stress impact. The ovaries don't deliver their normal amount of FSH. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. When FSH in a normal cycle, FSH from the ovaries goes to the egg. So the FSH goes to the egg, and the egg matures, right? Then LH, which is luteinizing hormone, comes in, and the egg is released, right? And then the system it either gets fertilized or it doesn't. And then it releases through the system with menses. And then there's an increase in progesterone. That's a normal cycle. With PCOS, what happens is FSH, there isn't enough FSH to mature the egg, which means that's why there's a formation of a cyst. So the LH tries to come in to release, but it doesn't happen. And when that happens, there's a misfiring so the estrogen level stays high and the progesterone doesn't kick in because the egg's never released. I hope that makes sense. It's a confusing series of events, right? But this is because these follicles don't mature. You can see as it travels down here, the ovary cysts form, which equals lower progesterone. Now, lower progesterone, like we've talked about, irregular periods, mood swings, depression, anxiety, and then it impacts the thyroid. So there's so much happening within this system. When there's more LH, that increases your testosterone, impacted by your stress. And then on the hormonal change side, that's your thyroid, increase in insulin, which is going to increase your testosterone. So you can see how this all kind of plays together. The key here is, with all of this, number one, we have stress impact. There's some food that we want to talk about. And then testosterone in conjunction with low progesterone is where all the symptoms come from. So I like this slide because it kind of gives you all of these things here in one place. If you would like a slide, please let me know and I'll share them with you, okay? So let's talk about stress itself with this PCOS, right? You can see what's causing the stress externally is we have anxiety, depression, and mood shifts. We have negative self-image, which in turn, isolation, not fitting in, hormonal shifts. So all these things are kind of circling around with PCOS. So how can we try to decrease stress so that we can get the hypothalamus and the pituitary to talk and communicate in a little bit more functional way so that there is a little bit less disruption in the hormonal system with the ovaries, with the thyroid, and with the adrenals. Okay, so what we're trying to do is go to the source, which is the stress between the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. From here, let's start talking about what you can do, right? How do we decrease stress? Stress happens usually from external circumstances. Something's happening at work. It could be family generated. It could be mood generated, right? So if there's anxiety, depression, any of those things. The number one thing that can help with stress, and I can't emphasize this enough, is breathing. Just breathing. And it feels so simple, but breathing connects the head to the body, right? So if you think about breath comes in from the head into the mouth and from the nose, and it goes into the body. So we're connecting to the body. If you can pause and just think about taking a slow breath, all of a sudden there's a big deep breath in and an exhale out. The body automatically starts to shift into the parasympathetic nervous system. When you're anxious, when something happens, anger, frustration, a lot of those different emotions, we get heightened energy. So there's heightened energy, which kind of tightens us up, and we start to breathe very shallow. When we're breathing very shallow, we're driving ourselves into this sympathetic stress system. So by just breathing, we can start to reduce our stress. And one of the hardest things about reducing stress is that when you are in this heightened state, it is the last thing you can think about. So by practicing breathing on a regular basis, on a daily basis, you are able to access different ways to breathe when you're in a heightened state. I hope that makes sense. If you're anxious or angry or in that heightened state of fight, flight, freeze, that is the hardest time to access breath. But if we can build some memory, right, some pathways in the brain to remember how to breathe, it makes it easier to access. A couple of ways to breathe. Let me talk about a couple of different ways that breath can really start to pull you into your parasympathetic nervous system. The first one I want to talk about is trying to exhale a little longer than your inhale. That's one of the number one keys, is that we want to really exhale a little bit more than we inhale. And so if you were to inhale, say for a 5 count, and pause at the top just briefly enough so that you can sense the transfer from inhale to exhale, and then exhale out 6 or 7 or 8 counts. So the breath in can be really any number, slow breath in and then a slow breath out, but the exhale is longer. One of the, some of the research is a 7 count up with a single count and then an 8 count down. It's a 7, 1, 8, kind of that cycle. But the key is exhalation is longer than inhalation. And if you can breathe for about 30 seconds, that's where the research says it kicks into the parasympathetic, which means it's usually about 4 or 5 breaths. Some people I know have something that they touch, a bracelet, a ring, a necklace, that you even might hold their hands together. But what's happening is they're linking a physical action to the breath, right? So we're kind of connecting a physical action with the breath, and it pauses long enough. It's kind of like a, what's that word? Like we're trying to connect this physical, like touching. I have a woman that has a ring that her mom gave her, right? So she holds onto her ring and she starts to breathe. So it's a connection to her mother, and then there's a connection with the breath. So it helps link her to the breath. So we're kind of putting that physical action to the breath. 2 other types of breaths I want to talk about real quick. One is a square breath, which is a 4 count up, 4 count across, 4 count down, 4 count across to kind of make a square. So it's inhale 4, pause for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 4. A note on the square breath. For some people, it makes them more anxious because they're having to hold their breath. If you're at a heightened state and this makes you more anxious, go back to something that's a shorter hold on the top and the bottom, because we don't want to put you into a higher anxious space. But the square breath really helps you start to control your breath. And the last one is alternate nostril breathing. I don't know a lot about this other than the research says that the alternating nostril breathing really works with slowing the brain down and pulling you into that parasympathetic nervous system. The alternating nostril breathing is an inhale and exhale out of one nostril. It's the two, you use a thumb and a finger, and it's inhale and exhale out of one, and then you just switch inhale and exhale out of the other nostril. So you're going back and forth from one nostril to the next. So breath is one of the easiest, simplest ways to pull yourself into a parasympathetic calming of stress level. Meditation, lots of different ways to meditate, quieting your your mind and your brain. Meditation can be done guided. There's lots of different guided meditations online that you can find. Meditation can be done walking, right? There's walking meditations. Meditation can be done just sitting quietly or standing quietly or laying quietly as well. So there's lots of different ways that you can experiment with meditation. And when you think about meditation, the one thing I like to make sure people understand with meditation is that it does not, our mind is designed to be very active. It is, the monkey mind, they call it monkey mind, right? That is what our brain does. So it's not, if you can concentrate for 1 or 2 seconds, and then your brain is distracted, and then you can come back and concentrate for 1 or 2 seconds. That's success. If you're coming back to concentrate on breath, to concentrate on a body part, to concentrate on a mantra, possibly, right? A mantra is something that you say over and over again. The brain is going to go off into a tangent. It's just if you bring it back to wherever, to the calmness or wherever you're concentrating, that's successful. So if you were to meditate, say for 5 minutes, and you were concentrating on your breath, if you were distracted 100 times, but after each time you came back to your breath, that's a successful meditation. So just understand with meditation, our brain is distracted, but it's another great way to release and calm you down. Gratitude. These are all researched ways to bring your body into the parasympathetic nervous system and decrease stress. Gratitude, there's a lot of different ways to practice gratitude. You can do a gratitude jar. You can do a gratitude journal. I like to do a stop sign gratitude or a stoplight gratitude. So every time I stop at a stoplight or a stop sign, I think about something I'm thankful for. So there's lots of different ways that you can practice gratitude. Because if you put yourself in a place of gratitude, it takes the energy and it takes the attention away from other things that are going on. So it starts to calm you down. Laughter, another wonderful way to decrease stress. And I think you all will agree that laughter can be a great way to decrease stress. What makes you laugh? Any videos that make you laugh, any movies that make you laugh, any people that make you laugh, right? Those are great things to seek out if you are in a place of stress. Nature, getting out in nature, right? Taking a walk, taking a drive, sitting on the beach. Where in nature calms you? There's lots of research on water, right? There's research on forest bathing, taking your shoes and socks off, walking in the grass, right? Walking on leaves, walking on sand. It's that energy between the feet and the earth that helps with connection and attention and mindfulness. And then lastly, for stress is connection. A lot of times when we are stressed, having someone to connect to or to validate you or to understand you can be another way that we can decrease our own stress level as well. Another way to think about decreasing stress, which I'm going to move into now, is taking care of yourself or taking time for yourself. What happens, especially for women, is we're taking care of everybody else. And that itself increases our stress load. So stress, when we think about PCOS and the pituitary gland's actions, right, on the ovaries, on the thyroid, and the adrenals, when we think about the adrenals, the connection to the adrenal gland, anytime we're in stress, that gets activated and it increases our cortisol levels. Cortisol is the fight, flight, freeze hormone, and it kicks in with stress. Cortisol is going to signal the body to hold on to weight, which is one of those things that's going to impact insulin as well, and it's going to impact metabolism. So all of those things kind of are coming in together. Insulin and cortisol, those two increase, and that is going to increase cravings. And I'll talk about that in a little bit too. But this cortisol piece is linked to insulin. It's linked to our adrenal glands. And that's why the stress piece is so important. So I'm going to go on one more slide here. We're going to move from stress to self-care, right? So thinking about anybody, and I know that a couple of you, we work together, and you know that I'm really big on taking care of yourself. And we don't want this to be a chore, but this is how can you take care of yourself? In today's society, it has been talked about to us that if we take time for ourselves, we're selfish. And the problem is, if we're always giving, we don't have anything left to really give anymore. And so I want you to think about really filling your own tank. And by filling your own tank, it decreases your stress level. So taking care of yourself is a really big, important piece of this. It's linked to the stress. And this is just a couple different ways. Whatever it is that makes you smile, makes you feel good, is going to help link to decreasing stress. So when we talk about being in a heightened state of stress or anxiety, and those two kind of get linked together, finding something that you can bring your mind to is one of the best things to try to, that's why I like thinking about finding a touchstone. Some people might have a worry stone, right? A rock. And like I had talked about the woman with the ring. But what is it that you can link to? Okay, I'm getting stressed. There's research on Play-Doh or silly putty, kind of a stretching, something that's active with the hands. Those are things that can help decrease stress, because there's a action that's going and linking to the hands, which is linking to the brain. So their attention goes away from coloring, can be one of those things too, right? But what is it that you can link to breathing or decreasing stress for yourself? Holding some or working with some Play-Doh or some silly putty can just be a way of bringing you to breath that can decrease your stress. Pets are another great way to decrease your stress. And they can be a link, they can be a physical link too. So these are some of the things that we're talking about how to decrease stress. All right. So before I go on, I'll just do a real quick ask anybody if they have any questions so far on kind of what we've covered. Why PCOS kind of impacting the stress is such a big important piece. Is it because it's impacting that hypothalamus pituitary kind of connection, so that everything underneath, all the hormones get all mixed up? Okay, I'm going to kind of move on. Eating and moving. Okay, these are the big ones, right? With PCOS, I'm not going to pop back to all those signs and symptoms, but weight gain, acne, increased hair growth, things like that. Those are all things that impact the way you feel about yourself. And with weight, one of the things that unfortunately, with a lot of the women that I do work with PCOS, is one of the biggest symptoms that we try to address, right? Because the most prescribed prescription for PCOS is weight loss and increased exercise. Now, I'm not saying that these aren't important, but if we put weight loss as the most important thing, what happens is it increases our stress. So that becomes a problem because now we're in this little cycle. So yes, we want to address weight and we want to look at eating and moving, but let's talk about how to do that and what's the most successful way to do that that is also sustainable. And the key of this is that a diet is not the answer. The biggest thing that is happening right now is the low carb, like the keto or the paleo. That's kind of the one thing that is being talked a lot about when it comes to PCOS. I see it in different avenues, right? It might work for some, but the key to this is carbohydrates fuel your brain. The body needs carbohydrate. So we need to have some carbohydrate in the diet. With a keto and a paleo, they really pull a lot of the carbohydrates out. When we pull the carbohydrates out, what happens is then there is both, two things can happen, an increased thoughts about food and thoughts about carbohydrates, but also increase cravings for carbohydrates, which might lead to, a binge or overeating of carbohydrates. So we have to try to find a happy medium in the middle where you're getting enough carbohydrates and you're not, so that you're feeding your body that it has enough, so it's not craving for more. So let's talk a little bit about why diets don't work and what else we can do instead, right? So I know some of you already know this, but when it comes to dieting, we have a lot of things that are moving against us. So anything that I consider, what I consider a diet, let's talk about that for a second, or what we consider for the point of this particular talk, what are we considering a diet? If I have all foods in my hand, right, and I take out a certain type of food, say it's carbs or say it's gluten, right? That's what I'm going to take out. It can be dairy, because dairy is another one that's controversial with PCOS, and we will address that. So if we're taking a particular food out in order to lose weight, that becomes a diet, because the objective is to lose weight, right? So we're taking something out. Now, if we were to take something out of our eating plan or our diet because it doesn't make us feel good, that's not, because it's a choice. I am choosing not to eat a particular food because it doesn't make me feel good. That's going to be the key as we experiment with foods. Everybody with PCOS is going to be a little different. And I think that's something that needs to be heard. Everyone's going to be a little different. Carbohydrates for everybody with PCOS is not going to be the same. It's going to be a little different. And it's really starting to work with your body. What is your stress level? What is your diet history? And let's kind of create something specifically for you. When it comes to dieting or removing a particular food in order to lose weight or decrease calorie level, I call calorie level energy. So decreasing our energy intake. We decrease our energy intake so that the body's not getting enough. These are the things that happen. We have an increase in ghrelin. Ghrelin is our hunger hormone, so you start to get hungrier. We have a decrease in leptin. Leptin is our fullness hormone. With this decrease in leptin, what happens is when you eat, you don't feel full. So then you need to eat, you feel that need to eat more, or it becomes more kind of a craving issue. So if we're on a diet, we're getting hungrier and we can't get full. So those are two things that happen physiologically within the body. The metabolism drops out. So now we're affecting the thyroid. The thyroid is already affected with the PCOS hormonal imbalance as is. So we don't want to add any more there, right? Increase in cortisol. We already have issues with cortisol when it comes to stress and PCOS. So this is happening within your control. So external stress, not as much control. We have a little bit of control of external stress, but not a lot. We do have control of what we put in our body and how we move our body, right? How much we move and how much we eat or how little we eat. If we have a control of a way to decrease our internal physiological stress, that's what we want to do. So by going on a diet, that's going to increase our internal physiological stress. So that's why this is not something that we want to do. And we'll talk about what we do, but increase. So we have an increase in cortisol, and then there's that increased thoughts about food, right? Increased insulin. So if there's insulin resistance, that's going to increase cravings for sugar, fat, and salt. And so this whole cycle is happening internally. So this is internal physiological things that go on with the body with dieting. So let's talk about what we do, right? Where do we go? And some of you all know where we're headed here. Tuning in to your own physiological hunger and fullness. How do you, do you know when you're hungry? What signs does your body, how does your body tell you when you're hungry? So it's starting to tune in to your own physiological hunger and your own feeling of fullness. It's you tuning in to start trusting your own body. The body is very smart. Now with PCOS, since we have hormonal disruption, it sometimes takes more work to tune hunger and fullness. Yet we can do it. The thing that we want to really be aware of is how foods make you feel. And the three things that I want you to think about when it comes to how foods make you feel. Number one is energy. How is your energy level after you eat? What does that look like? So we have energy, cravings. Are you craving food? And when you think about cravings, really pausing and asking yourself where they're coming from. Is it a physical craving, which it could be, or is it an emotional craving? So you're craving a food due to an emotional impact, something that's going on emotionally. And then the other is hunger. If you eat a meal and within an hour you're feeling physically hungry, we want to look at what that meal included to see if it has what your body needs. If you eat a meal and in an hour you're ready to take a nap, or you're craving a specific food, something's not right in the nutrition of the meal. So we want to take a look at that. So those are kind of, I call it HEC, right? HEC, hunger, energy, cravings. So those are the three things we want to kind of be in tune to with your body when you're working with your physiological hunger and fullness. And how do foods feel in your body? How, if you have a particular meal that has a lot of carbohydrate, how does it make you feel? So carbohydrates we want to look at, but carbohydrates can be eaten, obviously. We need them. Our body needs them. But we might have to fine tune how much carbohydrate you have within each meal, so that we have to look at that, because the hunger and the cravings and the energy can be impacted with too much carbohydrate and the type of carbohydrate. So that's an important piece. So how does your body feel? Carbohydrates are one. The type of carbohydrate is an important piece, and I'm going to get to that in a second. And the other one is the dairy. Let's take a look at dairy. So for my friend Karen, who loves dairy, but dairy does not feel good for her, and so she cut it completely out until we started to talk a little bit more about it. And then once we did, what we did is we adjusted. We changed. She tried a couple of other, she loves cheese, so we tried a couple of other cheeses. We also changed what she ate with the cheese and how much of it she was eating. And all of a sudden she's able to eat cheese now. It looks different, right? So it's not all or nothing. It's just we just made some shifts in it. So this intuitive eating is really your design. It's creating your own design for food that works for you. And what does that look like? And the other part that's important is the importance of satisfaction. Are you satisfied with your meals? Because if you're not satisfied, then there's a tendency to turn to food, right? So that's an important piece. So here you'll see this connection of your meals and your snacks with hunger, cravings, and energy. Paying attention to symptoms with inflammatory foods. Okay, so we're looking at cow's milk, processed cheese, meats, alcohol, vegetable oils, and margarine. These are the things that you can tune into more. Some people, cheeses respond with like phlegm or like heartburn, or it goes right through you, right? So there's lots of different things that cow's milk, that could be the same thing. If it is eaten with something, that can create a slowdown of the digestive process, right? So if some of these things are eaten with some carbohydrate, especially some complex carbohydrate with fiber, that's going to slow the digestion down, then it might not respond the same way in your system. This is all experimenting, and you're all going to be, everybody's going to be different. And this goes for PCOS, but it also goes for everybody. We all have different ways of digesting food, and some foods work for us and some foods don't. And this is where it's your choice. How do foods work in your body? So these are some of the things to think about: cow's milk, cheeses, meats, alcohol, vegetable oils, and margarine. Okay. So hopefully we're all good. So this is what I call structured flexibility in eating. So we have, if you were to look at a plate, right, we have protein, complex carbohydrate, vegetables, and fruit. And you'll see the complex carbohydrate is kind of, there's a little bit of a line that's adjusted. So some people might need a little bit more protein. I'm going to kind of see if you can see in between the fruits and vegetables and the complex carbs, this little space here. It might be for some more vegetables and fruit. It might be for some a little bit more complex carbs. It might be for some a little bit more protein. Protein is for the most part, is a very, very important piece of the PCOS diet. So it might be that. And then fat's a real important piece, because that's we have a myelin sheath in our brain, and that's a real important piece for our nerve connections in conversations, that they're talking to each other properly. So fat's a very important piece as well. So protein, very, very important. Complex carbs. What are complex carbs? That would be things like brown rice, steel-cut oatmeal, potatoes. Some squashes would be in there too, quinoa, seeds, things like that. So complex carbohydrates are, it could be some whole grain breads, right? If you can work with foods that are a little bit less processed, that's really helpful too. Beans, complex carbs beans are great for that as well. And mix some beans up with some quinoa or some rice. Pasta, trying to think about maybe some whole grain pasta. And how do they sit with you? So it's really this combination of all foods. complex carbohydrates, processed foods are going to be higher in sugar, higher in fat. So when eating any processed foods, really notice how they make you feel. And also, if there's a particular processed food that you really like and you want to have it as part of your diet, this is sustainable. Remember, we might just adjust what you eat with it to create more stability in your insulin, your blood sugar levels, so the insulin doesn't spike. And that's a different way that we can be flexible within your eating program. So protein, fats, and carbohydrates, that's kind of this connection that we want to try to fine tune for you. So everybody's going to be a little different. We're going to move from eating to moving. How are we doing for time? Okay, here we go. Moving on. Hope you're all doing okay. Moving. This is another piece with PCOS. It's, lose weight, exercise more. Key for PCOS. This is kind of my own, being in the fitness industry for a long time. This is my own way of kind of creating a movement plan that avoids over injury, avoids internal stress on the body due to working the body too hard, too long, too much. Because that's what can happen too, is that, I have to work out really hard in order to lose weight. Moving and exercise, when it comes to our overall metabolic rate, is only about 20% of our overall metabolic activity. The rest, we have some digestion of foods. 30% is the brain. The muscles do some, but it's internal organs, respiration, digestion, just keeping the liver going, the heart going, all of our nerve function. So metabolically, it's only about 20%. You can't over-exercise. If you over-exercise to try to lose weight, what happens is then you're increasing internal stress. And that's one of those things that we can't control. Can't control the external stress, but we can control the internal stress. So this is kind of a combination of three different things. Functional strength. When I say functional strength, it's how to some type of strength training that we do at a more intense level, right? But it's shorter period of time. So it's 30 minutes or less. So that might be some of the interval training, the HIIT training, that kind of thing that you do hear about, but 2 times a week maximum, because what happens if we do it more than that is then we're adding stress to the body. The other sessions, because we do with PCOS, we want to try to move the body, on a daily basis for the most part. It does not have to be at a gym. It doesn't have to be what we think about as traditional type of exercise. Getting out and walking, getting out and doing some dancing. And the joyful movement is really anything that you like. What do you like to do? Do you like to dance? Do you like to play tennis? Do you like to cross country ski? Whatever it is that you like to do, that's what we want you to do. So the key is, the other way that I look at this, or I share with people, is this 2 days hard, 2 days moderate maybe, and 2 days easy. That at least keeps you at a level keel, so that you're not going to increase stress levels with moving. Okay. So walking, couple of things, right? We have a decrease in stress. We know that's what walking does. Getting out in nature, so that we're decreasing stress there. So there's a connection there. Independence. It gives you, it creates independence for you. If you can walk, that means you can go to the store by yourself. You can do, that it helps us continue with our independence. Connection with other people. So you're looking, you can have walking, like a coffee meeting with somebody, but instead of going for coffee or taking a walk, so you can connect with others. It's available anytime, anywhere. It's easy and it's functional. So walking is one of the keys to this kind of system. And what I'll say is, if walking is causing you pain, then we want to get you out of pain. How do we get you out of pain? And what does that look like? Because getting out of pain is number one when it comes to all kind of moving. First step, get you out of pain. Second step, find things that you can do while you're getting out of pain, right? The water's a great place to be when you're in pain, because there's a buoyancy, and that it helps the body tremendously. So first get out of pain, and then we move into our functional strength and our walking and our fun. So here's just some ideas of some joyful movement. Some yoga, Tai Chi, stretching is always a great, those are great. Dancing, Zumba, hiking, getting out on a playground, walking your dog. So whatever is fun for you, that's the key here. All right. The third key, overcoming negative body image. I think this is one of the things that we really want to think about when it comes to PCOS, because of some of the symptoms. So you look at the symptoms of PCOS, and it's overwhelming when we look at society and what is happening around us. There's we call it the strive for the thin ideal. So much media and culture is surrounded by being a certain size, and that happiness is within a certain body size. And this is where your body is your body. And let's start to work with your body right here, right now, today, where it is today. So when we think about body image, and you think about this internal, external, we get our own body image from what's around us, from the most part. So if you think about this question yourself, where does your own body image come from? Does it come from society? Does it come from family? Does it come from people around you? Does it come from the medical profession? Does it come from the fashion industry? Does it come from, I don't know, I'm trying to think, but media and culture and society has a lot to do with it. And what I want you to think about, as even if you feel like it's coming from within you, it's coming from within you because of what you've been told or what's happened around you, especially with family and the way that you grew up. That can have a really big impact on your own body image. So when we think about this, I want you to think about how you speak to yourself, right? How do you talk to yourself? What experiences have you had that lead to how you feel about yourself? Do you compare yourself to others? Are you judgmental? I think judgments are spelled wrong, but are you judgmental of yourself? And do you compare yourself to others? And as you think about that for a second, I'm just going to pause and have you think for a second, and I'm going to kind of go through each one. If you criticize yourself, if you talk poorly about yourself, I think you might have seen it at one of the slides when we were talking about diet. 97% of women have an I hate my body moment every single day. And if our thoughts, 80% of our thoughts, we have day after day after day. And so if we're having negative thoughts about our body, most likely we're having them day after day after day, and it could be multiple times a day. if we are talking poorly about ourselves, right? Thinking about that, if you don't like yourself, there's a connection with not treating yourself very well. The analogy I use there is, I call it the good gift, bad gift, analogy, right? If you get a great gift at a holiday time, that great gift, you take care of it. You wear it if it's something that you wear. You put it out. You water it if it's a plant. Whatever it is. If you get a great gift, you take care of it. If you get a gift that you don't like, one that you kind of, it wasn't quite right for you, you usually either regift it, give it to Goodwill, or it ends up in the back of the closet. If you're thinking poorly day after day after day after day about you and your body, there's a tendency not to treat it very well. And what do I mean by that? Talking poorly to yourself, negative self-talk. Food could be an issue here, right? You don't do things because of the way you look. So it's like you remove yourself from your life. So if you have a critical inner voice, many of us do, right? But this critical inner voice is something that we want to address and start to change, because criticism doesn't equal success. It doesn't equal progress. It just equals more criticism, more isolation, more feeling bad about yourself, more self-punishment, right? So voices, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide, but that's one of the things to really think about. Experiences, what experiences are you holding on to define you, to define who you are? We all have experiences in our life that shape us, right? Do we want to continue to hold on to them, or do we want to try to look at them differently, look at them with a different perspective, change the way they do not define us? Our experiences do not define us. We can take what we want and we can let go of some of the others. Comparison. You are not anybody else, only you, period. That's it. You have a unique gene pool that is all yours. And you have your experiences that have created who you are. Comparing yourself to others is like that whole apples to oranges. The more you compare yourself to others, usually what happens is then you feel bad about yourself, and then it spirals down into the negative self-talk. Judgments. If you judge others, that means you're judging yourself as well. If you judge yourself, the more you judge yourself, the more judgment usually is projected to others as well. The key is to pause and think about how you're judging yourself. The less you judge yourself, the less you'll notice judging others as well. This body image piece is hard. It's hard work. It takes time, but it's important work, because this can become a huge stressor, and we know how the stress impacts PCOS. It's very interesting how all these things kind of go back to stress. That's why we started with it. Self-talk pathway. This is that inner voice. If we say the same words over and over and over again, they become very, very, very easy. They're easy. They're safe. We know what we're saying to ourselves, and they're automatic. What we want to try to do is find some compassion for self, be kinder to yourself, and change the voice. This is not easy because the negative, destructive voice is so strong and so ingrained, and this path has been walked. If you look at this path to the beach, it's been walked and walked and walked and walked. And if this is a negative voice, if you were to step out into the dune grass on either side, it's not very comfortable. And that's what it feels like in the beginning with this compassionate, kinder voice. But it has to start somewhere. And so how do you do it? Through beginning to be aware of the negative voice, noticing the negative voice. So you'll see here, the starting point is noticing and becoming aware, and then it's shifting it. And then we have something that's some positive self-talk. We have some positive self-talk tapes that are great because it's a shift. It's getting the brain to start to shift and think and hear differently. I call it flooding. We have to start to flood the brain with positive words, with compassionate words, with kind words, because they're so used to all the others. And then it's repetition, repetition, repetition. Okay. So I'm going to have you pause. I'm checking the time. It's a little after 8. I hope you're all doing okay. We started tonight, a little over an hour ago, talking about how with PCOS, there is miscommunication between the pituitary gland and your ovaries, your thyroid, and your adrenals, right? So the hormone imbalance that's happening creates your own unique internal stress. It increases the cortisol levels, right? It decreases your progesterone and increases your testosterone and shifts your metabolism, increases your insulin. So there's all these things going on. And the number one thing to help relieve some of this is to try to find a way to decrease your stress level. And part of that has to do with starting this new journey with yourself, beginning to take a look at yourself differently. The company that I have is called Shaping Perspectives, because what I'd like you to think about is how can you shift your own perspective on the way that you eat, on food, on the way that you move your body, on the way that you take care of yourself with self-care, the way you talk to yourself, and the way that you feel about your body. And what does that look like? So we want you to just kind of close your eyes for a second and take a nice deep breath in, and try to take a deep breath in for about 6 or 7 counts. And as you get to the top, pause, and then exhale. And try to exhale out all your air before you take another breath in. And I want you to think about how can you begin to look at yourself differently. How you move through this world uniquely. What are your talents? What are your gifts? What do you want to share with the world? And think about a phrase of some sort that you can begin to tell yourself that's compassionate and kind. A couple things that I have recommended that are simple and more neutral. I am human. I'm doing the best I can. I'm strong and capable. I am kind and compassionate. Starting to think about who you are in your own uniqueness versus comparison. And how do you want to take care of your body as you move forward? How do you want to give it energy? What things do you want to do? Take another deep breath in and out. And as you keep your eyes closed, the one other thing I want to share with you is, are you able to think about or visualize a place that is really comfortable for you, that is calming? It could be inside or outside, doesn't matter. It could be a room in the house. It could be a comfy chair. It could be outside by on a beach or in a mountain or by a lake or a waterfall. And then think about really looking around, what is there, colors, shapes, sounds, what makes it calming to you. In this place where you're here now, where you're calm and you can breathe, you can bring this particular place up anytime you want. Because you can elicit the feelings of a space like this within your mind, and it actually will impact your system to pull you into that parasympathetic nervous system. So before you go to bed tonight, I want you to, kind of take a moment to write down somewhere what your phrase was, and also write down somewhere, like, where I call it this your inner sanctuary. Where is your inner sanctuary? What's around you? What makes it calming? So you have it. Because when you're in a place of heightened anxiety, it's hard to pull it up. So you can open your eyes, you can take a look at this beautiful sunrise, right? But where is your space? This is my space, but where is your space? So as you move, forward, I want you to really remember the impact of stress for PCOS. So these are kind of the things that we talked about. Stressing, I call it stress less with daily self-care. We talked about breathing and meditation and nature and laughter and connection. Practicing body AA. I call it that Maxi-Me, your inner voice, but starting to really, body AA, is, I call it body AA, acceptance and appreciation, right? Beginning to appreciate your own body, today's body, right? Intuitive eating, joyful movement, pulling these all together. And so if you've been doing the same thing over and over again and not getting anywhere, I want you to think about, this is that voice that goes over and over and over and over again, right? So, and it doesn't have to be that way. You can start differently. So, and change it. So I want to offer offer you all. I know that some of you already work with me, and that's great. I so appreciate working with every person that I work with. I love. But if you don't, and you're looking for a strategy session so that we can kind of what works best for you, and we can talk about moving into what works best for you. If you're interested, I'm offering a $59, strategy session. Let's talk about food. Let's talk about moving. Let's talk about self-care and stress and how we can you can work and find your own structured flexibility within your own life. So this is open for anybody. So any of you can do this. You can contact me at AnnPoirier11@gmail.com. I would love to set up a time to talk with you. So I'm going to open this up for questions. If anybody has any questions, I've hoped you found this kind of informative and you understand kind of what's going on in your body a little bit. I do believe that anything is possible. And my mission is to help women love what is, live with joy, and connect more deeply with yourself and with others so that you can kind of share your own gifts and talents. The other contact is Annie@shapingperspectives.com. So does anybody have any questions? I want to thank you all for spending some time with me, and I hope that this has helped a little bit. As we finish up, I don't see any questions. So, okay, hold on. Okay, Stephanie just asked what I said about something being only 20%. That's exercise. So exercise and movement is 20% of our metabolic. Like if I were to do a pie chart, like I did with the food, if you had a pie chart, 20% would be exercise and movement. And the rest is our body. It's our resting metabolic rate. That's, our just the weight, it takes that much, takes 80%. 30% is our brain. So just for our brain to move through the day. So that's a good question. Thanks for asking that. Any other questions for anybody? So think about, as you move forward, really being aware of food, how its impact on your body. We talked a lot about, carbohydrate is kind of the carbohydrate piece and the dairy piece. Those are a couple of things. Oh, the other thing I wanted to share with you before we go to is a couple of different things. I forgot when we were talking about nutrients, a couple of different things that have been researched to help with PCOS. Vitamin D, right? So vitamin D, omega-3s, so it's like fish oils and stuff, also omega-3s, green tea. So there's a lot of health benefits to green tea, but that's helpful for PCOS. And then the other one, and I am and this is just from some of the research that I've done personally, is chromium and inositol. And I'm kind of looking at some of my notes over here, so I apologize. But it helps with this insulin resistance. So choline and inositol can help with insulin resistance. So that's something that might be worth looking into. And if those are things that you want to look into, I always would recommend checking with your doctor as well. So B vitamins, vitamin D, omega-3, and then choline and inositol. So I'm glad I remembered those. Question? Nope. Okay. All right. So I am going to stop recording here, stop share, come back to you all. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining me for today. I really appreciate you being here and spending time with me. And if you have any questions, please feel free to, to email me or to reach out, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. I'm going to stop recording. If you would like this, if you are signed up, if you registered, I will be sending this out to you. If you did not register, I know that you've probably seen a link. Please register.